Hey, I'm Hollis, and welcome to the Friendly Fangirl podcast, where I nerd out on the films, shows, and video games that I encounter every week. Be sure to follow this podcast, and please follow my Twitter and blog at Hollis Films to follow my journey experiencing the entertainment industry's greatest stories. Beware of spoilers, you have been warned. Hogwarts Legacy comes out today. And before I jump into playing the game and watching other people play it as well, here are my hopes and dreams for Hogwarts Legacy, one of my most anticipated games of the year. This game was only announced within the last few years, but honestly, it's felt like I've waited my whole life for this game. If you are unaware, Harry Potter fan is a core personality trait of mine. To the people in my close friend circle, I'm the residential Potter nerd that knows too much useless trivia. I talk about it on the daily and see memes on all social media platforms I'm on. Hogwarts is my home, and this video game is everything I could have ever dreamed of. So here are my hopes and dreams for this game. First and most importantly, I would like to play this on my Nintendo Switch. I love the Switch, but I understand its capabilities compared to PC. Before the delay, it was a high concern that Hogwarts Legacy could be another cyberpunk disaster, but the fact that they delayed the Switch port much later gives me a lot of hope. I will be buying the PC version as well, just in case. Wouldn't be the first time I've wasted money on this franchise, but it would be ideal to have the game not crash or be full of crippling bugs. If that's what the delay meant, then so be it. According to current canon and math, Albus Dumbledore is to start his first year of Hogwarts when our character is in the last. Is it too much to ask to see him? As soon as they said this game takes place in the late 1800s, I was like, yeah, it's a given, we're seeing Albus. But we have no idea what the scope of the story is, so it's still up in the air if Albus would make an appearance or not. This isn't a desire, more of an indifferent curiosity, but how big is this game really? I know you can explore every corner of the castle, but it's a seamless transition to step outside and wander over to Hogsmeade and surrounding areas. But what about past that? Does everything take place in the immediate area of Hogwarts, or are we traveling to other parts of the country or even the world? If we're stuck in that area, I personally don't care. It's called Hogwarts Legacy. Story is a secondary enjoyment for me. I came to be at Hogwarts. This is where I want to stay. But still, what's the true scope of the story? I'm not sure if it's confirmed or not, but can we have multiple saves? I'm a Hufflepuff, and my true playthrough is going to be me, Newt Scamandering all over that room of requirement, rescuing animals, giving them names. Sheesh. But I also want to live out my Rumpelstiltskin from Once Upon a Time vibes through a separate Slytherin character. I mean, I'm gonna have the game on 2 different consoles, but do I need to do that to have 2 different playthroughs? And furthermore, how can we explore the other common rooms if we wanted to? And finally, I would like to love this game as much as the developers do. I know there's been much controversy surrounding the Wizarding World, and people are completely validated in being upset. But every time we've seen the developers talk about this game, they are just so full of love and pride in what they created for us. They pulled from every resource available to them to bring us the most authentic and rich and full experience possible for a Wizarding World video game. All the books, all the movies, even a freaking theme park ride. I want to support them so bad. I want to support their years of hard work and dedication. The Wizarding World has gotten so much bigger than its creator, and these developers are a testament to that. I'm ready to immerse myself in the magic they created. American Horror Story is one of my favorite shows of all time. Since Apocalypse, we've gotten 1984, which wasn't top tier quality, but still kind of fun. Red Tide was like an 8 out of 10 for me. The visual aesthetics and the story were pretty spot on up until the last episode. Aliens was just hot trash. Though the 1950s sequences still kept me interested enough to some extent. But New York City, it's not even horror story. I'm usually a completionist when it comes to series. The only series that I ever stopped watching was The Walking Dead, and that's just because I read ahead on spoilers and didn't like where the show was going. But I at least have plans to revisit now that the series is over. I have 4 episodes of New York City left, and honestly, if I don't get back to it, I don't feel like I'm missing much. This season was an all-time low for me. I love the characters, I love the actors, and honestly the story, or at least a couple of concepts at play, they're not that bad. I intend to finish this season, and I hope all the top-tier high quality is hidden in these unwatched episodes. Kind of like in Cult, when the second half of that season was just a completely different level from the first half. But up to now, there's nothing in particular that is connecting me to the season in any way. I feel like if Horror Story was not attached to it, I definitely would be less harsh. New York City had potential, and if the final episodes continued to fall flat, then it would be potential wasted. Lord of the Rings. I see memes and film clips all the time, and I just had that Middle-earth itch. I just had to watch a film, and I chose Fellowship. The first half-ish hour is just nostalgic more than anything else in all existence. The music helps, but Hobbiton is just pure and cozy and honestly home to anyone and everyone who is into fantasy. You can't say you're a fan of the fantasy genre if the Shire doesn't make you shed at least a single tear. The pacing of these movies is just perfect. There is super fun, action-packed, well-choreographed fights. There are moments of tension. There are moments of grief. With The Fellowship, there are heartwarming, deep moments of friendship. The music can be epic, or charming, or emotional. The visuals are magical to the point that no traveling shot feels like a waste of time. This is a journey, and you feel like you're a part of it. The Fellowship itself. Icons. Legends. The faces of all fantasy adventures. Merry and Pippin, the Fred and George of the series, little troublemakers with big hearts and a desire to prove themselves. Samwise Gamgee, fierce friend driven by friendship, determined to keep his promise to always be by Frodo's side. Frodo himself, a little person with a big burden, heart heavy with the struggle as the ring bearer. Gandalf, a wizard is never early, nor is he ever late. He arrives precisely when he means to. That's it, that's all. Boromir, a flawed human with his people's best interests at heart, still willing to lay his life on the line for the greater good. However, over everyone, for me, it is the golden trio of getting things done. Before there was Harry, Ron, and Hermione, there was Luke, Leia, and Solo. Before Luke, Leia, and Solo, there was Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli. Now, the trio is more distinct in the other films, but it's more than a joy to meet them in Fellowship. Gimli is this roughhouse heart of stone, ready for a fight. Legolas represents all of the elven race with his talents and charms and beautiful hair. Love the friendship he eventually forms with Gimli, as elves and dwarves are slightly racist against each other. These guys, breaking boundaries. It all starts here. And last, but mother effing G, not the least, I would rather spend one mortal lifetime with Aragorn than all the lifetimes without him. Return of the King? Psh, he's always been there. I find Aragorn one of the most interesting characters, as he is a king with a great destiny, but has lived a humble life as a ranger, raised by elves. His love story with Arwen is precious and wholesome, and he can take down a horde of orcs if he really tried hard enough. And it doesn't help that he's really hot. I mean, honestly, the whole cast is attractive, but Viggo, definitely top 3. So I fangirled about the Fellowship. I gotta bring up some of my favorite moments. First of all,
if you want him, come and claim him.
Girl, Aragorn better watch out. That made me super gay.
You have my sword. And you have my bow.
And my axe.
That whole meeting, the entire scene is just iconic. Few memes there, but the Golden Trio declaring loyalty with their weapons, that made me super straight.
You shall not pass!
Enough said. The final scenes were just another level. I love Aragorn's last conversation with Frodo.
I would have gone with you to the end, into the very fires of Mordor.
It hits me deep, man, but not as much as Sam's.
I made a promise, Mr. Frodo.
Like, dude, that makes a grown man cry. But Aragorn is like, no time for crying.
Let us handsome walk.
And I'm like, Gimli, I am ready to go. And it takes a lot of restraint to not watch Two Towers immediately after. Lord of the Rings is a timeless tale. I'm excited for a full-blown marathon of the trilogy, extended versions and all. But for now, I'm happy to experience this one chapter of an epic legend. So I'm starting my Hannibal experience soon, the show from 2013 starring Mads Mikkelsen. And I wanted to do research on the titular character. I watched the excellent film from the 90s and didn't read all the books, so I really wanted to really deep dive into the fictional history of the character so I really understand the television adaptation. I'll be reading through the wiki fandom page that uses the books for all of these details. Hannibal Lecter and his little sister Misha were born and raised into a wealthy family within an ancient castle in Lithuania. His father was a descendant of the warlord Hannibal the Grim who built the castle. His mother also had a pretty fancy heritage as well from her roots in Italy. Lecter grew up as a well-educated rich boy, learning different languages and arts. During World War II, the castle was overrun by Nazis when the kids were still young. This led to a bombing in which only Hannibal and Misha survived. Still children, the siblings were held captive until another group of crazy people took over and looted for resources. This is when that group killed and ate Misha, a very traumatizing event for Lecter, who managed to escape emotionally scarred and changed forever. After living in Lecter Castle again, which was transformed into an orphanage in wartime during the family's absence, Hannibal was invited to France to live with his uncle and his wife. This is where he really delved into his artistic abilities, fell in love with his aunt, who taught him Japanese culture, and committed his first murder and willingly ate human flesh for the first time. After attending medical school in France, he returned to Lithuania. He gave Misha a proper burial and started his quest for revenge, which included killing and cannibalizing. And after some dramatic events, he succeeded And then the true Dr. Hannibal Lecter made his way to America. During his time as a psychiatrist in Baltimore, Hannibal killed at least 9 people, if not more. One of his attempted murders included Mason Verger, a child molester, incestuous rapist, and a patient of Dr. Lecter. Hannibal drugged him, convinced him to carve flesh from his face and feed it to his dogs, convinced him to eat his own nose, and then broke his back, hung him from a rope, and left him to die. He survived this totally mutilated and forever confined to life support and a wheelchair. Hannibal Lecter's victims were all mutilated and most likely eaten. Lecter preferred to eat the rude and thought his murders were a great civil duty to society. Wiki says victims included a census taker.
I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti.
And a missing Princeton student whom he buried. The FBI gave Lecter sodium amidol in the hopes of learning where he buried the student, but instead of giving them the location of the buried student, he gave them a recipe for potato chip dip, implying that the student was in the dip. Lecter trained himself by administering self-hypnosis in case he was ever administered hypnotic drugs like this. And apparently one traumatized officer retired after seeing Lecter's basement, so it's also presumed that parts of his victims were stored there. Lecter was caught by Will Graham, an FBI special agent and profiler who was investigating a series of murders in Baltimore area committed by a cannibalistic serial killer. At the point of the investigation when he confirmed the killer was Hannibal, Graham left to call the police, but Lecter crept up from behind and stabbed him with a knife, nearly disemboweling him. After surviving the experience, Graham recovered from his physical wounds and left the experience mentally scarred and retired from the FBI. But with this, Dr. Hannibal Lecter was caught and managed to convince the Court of Justice that he was insane, sparing him the death sentence. He began life in the Baltimore State Hospital for the Criminally Insane under Administrator Frederick Chilton. He was nicknamed Hannibal the Cannibal in the National Tattler by sleazy journalist Freddie Lowndes. Many psychologists deemed him not even to be a man due to his phenomenal intellect, rationale, and savage nature, and was branded a pure sociopath by Chilton, but only because they didn't know what else to call him. During his stay in Baltimore State Hospital, Lecter would help with 2 FBI cases. Graham came out of retirement to offer his insight on the Tooth Fairy case, and upon arriving at a dead end, went to Lecter for help. Once again, Will Graham leaves the experience permanently damaged. For full details, read The Red Dragon. 3 years later, a young Clarice Starling went to Lecter to administer a psychological questionnaire, which leads to revelations in the Buffalo Bill case. I give you Silence of the Lambs, and we all know how this ends. Using some sort of handcuff key, he slipped off his cuffs, killed 2 correctional officers, escaping by making a mask from the face of one of the officers, wearing the officer's uniform and face, pretending to be his own victim, so that he would be hurried away by an ambulance while the authorities hunted for him. He also murdered 2 paramedics and a tourist, stealing the tourist's clothes and identity, leaving the country placed on the FBI's 10 most wanted list. In Florence, Italy, he took the pseudonym Dr. Fell and murdered a man and took his old position as a museum curator. Detective Ronaldo Pazzi, who had failed solving the El Monstro case, which was probably Lecter, saw redemption when he discovered Dr. Fell's true identity. Patsy, in cahoots with a revenge-seeking Mason merger, tried to capture Hannibal, ultimately failing and being hung and disemboweled. Lecter returned to the US, and both Verger and good old Clarice were racing against each other to catch him. After a series of more dramatic events, Verger was dead, and Clarice was drugged in her attempts to rescue Hannibal, who carried her away from the scene. This is where the story of Clarice and Hannibal gets interesting. Read Hannibal, the book, for more details, but essentially, Hannibal tried to brainwash her into becoming Misha, but that failed as Starling refused to become someone else, even in her weird, vulnerable mental state. Rather than become his sister, she became his lover, and they rode off into the sunset and lived happily ever after. Like a cannibalistic Bonnie and Clyde, probably killing together, and as far as we know, not getting caught, as they live a romantic life in Argentina. You know, I ship it. Yeah. Anyways, Hannibal, the show, Mads Mikkelsen, can't wait. Yeah. That's it for this week. Again, follow me on Twitter or leave a comment, and let me know what you've been fangirling over this week. Thank you for joining me, and I'll talk to you again next week.